evening, everyone. Hello, thank you for coming to our third annual Linda Parker Memorial Lecture. Of course, we are honored to be able to host this lecture on Kumeyaay land, and we thank the Kumeyaay people for sharing this land with us, and particularly several members of the Kumeyaay community here tonight. Thank you so much for coming for this excellent event. I will introduce our speaker in a second, but first I just want to talk a little bit about Dr. Linda Parker. And I didn't expect to get emotional, but I will try not to get too emotional. Dr. Parker passed away about 3.5 years ago now. She was a faculty member here since the early 90s. She has a J.D. Ph.D., both from the University of Oklahoma. She was an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation. She wrote an award-winning book called Native American State, The Struggle Over Indian and Hawaiian Lands. And she wrote several articles about California Indian history, water rights issues. And she just was a wonderful person. She had a very strong, quiet way about her. She was a wonderful mentor to me and other faculty that came before and after me. And she was so wonderful to our Native students as well, in particular, all of our students, but particularly our Native students, and I know many of them had a nice bond with her. So we're really happy to be able to host this event once a year in her honor. And we're thrilled tonight to have Dr. Cutcha Risling Baldy speak at this event. She was a former member of our department, and she is currently assistant professor and chair of the Department of Native American Studies at Humboldt State University. She is Hupa, Yurok, and Karuk, and I know is happy to be home, but we miss her dearly down here, so we're really thrilled to have her speak tonight about several different things. So I'm excited for that, and I just want to, thank her again for coming. She was only here a brief time, but she left a wonderful mark on our department in such a nice way. I know many of her former students are here, and she will have a lasting impact on us. And I know she helped a nice influential role in helping us get faculty to replace her. So we're very pleased to have her back and have her give us so much great shout outs on her wonderful social media as well. Give her a follow. She's going to talk a little about her book, We Are Dancing For You, that just came out about a year ago, Native Feminism and the Revitalization of Women's Coming to Age Ceremonies. Unfortunately, we don't have copies to buy tonight, but we will let you know how to get some. It's a wonderful book. I highly recommend it. And without further ado, I will turn it over to you.
Let's see. Hey young, hole Cutcha Risling Baldy, Kunya an Afde, Kina Afde, Kisni Afde, Natinwe Afde. I'm Dr. Cutcha Risling Baldy. I'm Hupa, Yurok, and Karuk, which are 3 tribes in Northern California. When I introduce myself, I also say I'm Kunyat-yan. That is how in Hupa we say I'm a person, like I'm a human being. What it actually means is I'm an acorn eater, because we said in order to be a human being, you had to eat acorns. So I like to introduce myself as an acorn eater. Let's see, I am the Department Chair of Native American Studies at Humboldt State, and also an assistant professor, also a mom, also I have a puppy. She just thinks she's the center of everything. And I actually am also an alumni of San Diego State University. I got my master's degree here, my MFA. I'm not going to tell you what year because it's none of your business how old I am. And wrote a thesis that was a collection of short stories. I worked with the department here pretty closely and still really close to my advisor in that program. I really enjoyed my time at San Diego State and in San Diego. I always tell people that I was born and raised in Humboldt County, but I grew up in San Diego because that's where I actually did a lot of my growing up. I lived in PB, in case you guys are wondering, I was a PB'er. I was a North PB'er. I was not like one of those Garnet PB'ers, right? I was like North. I met my husband in IB. Like San Diego really has a lot of good memories. I love the people from this place. I love Southern California. I love bird singers. That's a Northern California thing. We get really excited about bird singers. We love bird singers. When they come up to our big town, we're like, bird singers! And we all get really excited. So when I was down here, everybody, like when I would put it up on Insta or Facebook, they'd be like, you get to see bird singers again? And I was like, every time. So enjoy your bird singers, Southern California. They're big deals. They're like rock stars to us, actually. Don't tell them that. Like really, we treat them like little rock stars when they come up north. Let's see, I was really excited that they invited me to come and do this talk because I always love coming to San Diego. But just so you guys know, in Humboldt County right now, it's sunny during the day. It was raining and snowing the last like 2 weeks, and then I left and they're like, it's gonna be sunny for 3 days. And I was like, I'm going to San Diego where it's raining. So, you're welcome. I brought that. So when they invited me to do this talk, I sent me this email and they were like, you have to decide what you're gonna talk about. And I was like, well, can I talk about anything? And they're like, you can talk about anything. And I really had like a moment of like, what am I gonna talk about? And I put it on Facebook as I do. Facebook will tell me what to do, right? All the people on Facebook. And I said, my initial response to this call for a talk about something was I would like to do a talk called, What the Fuck San Diego State, Your Mascot is Still Racist? An evening with Cutcha Risling. And actually, Facebook is not helpful because I had all these people on there like, do it, right? And then I actually had people who were like, I would fly from Boston to watch that talk if you actually made that your talk. And so I was really like thinking, like, how am I gonna do this? Because coming back to San Diego State now as, like, I had been here as a student, I'm now an alumni, I had been here as a professor. I wanted to be able to do a talk that I thought would open up discussion and dialogue around a lot of sort of like bigger issues that I've been thinking about outside of the book that I worked on. But also I didn't just want it to be about mascots, I wanted it to be about something else. And so what I settled on was the current title, which I wish I knew the whole thing. It's long, but I know the first part is thanks for coming, now give the land back. So this is actually a talk about decolonization and land. But it also is really focusing on sort of a lot of my thoughts around what decolonization is supposed to look like. It's sharing with you some experiences I've had in that now I go and talk to large groups of people and they find me all over the place and they're like, tell me something. And I'm like, all right, why don't you give the land back? And then they're like, how would that even work, right? Like, I don't understand. And so it's a little bit of my experience of trying to help people to use what, we are talking about in Native American Studies, radical imagination, to start to think about a decolonized future. But I have to begin with the mascot because the end of my title, my talk is, hi Candy. That was one of my students at HSU, guys. Say hi, Candy. Yay. And she's awesome. You should all say hi to Candy, she's amazing. Yay. But I will say that in looking at the work that I do think it's important to realize that like what we surround ourselves with is sort of how we start to understand the world and like how do we imagine a space sort of beyond the space in which we are in. And I am very interested in my opinion on the mascot, and that is mostly because every time people start talking about the mascot here at San Diego State, all I ever hear is, but the alumni, what about the alumni? What will the alumni say? And I am an alumni, so apparently I get more of a say over what should happen with the mascot. So I'm here to tell you what the alumni would say, right? I spent a lot of time with the students here, and I was very proud of them when they were working a little while ago to sort of introduce to the associated students the option of trying to pass something to start to get rid of the mascot here at San Diego State. And I watched that entire session go like live on Facebook. I watched everything go down from my office in Humboldt State because I knew like the amount of work and time and energy and space, the emotional labor that was going into those students being able to present in front of people why this was so important to them. And I was in awe of the fact that students would do that and that they would take that upon themselves because I do this work every day and I will tell you that it is hard on your body and your mind and the way that you sort of exist in space. And when you start to hear people say things to you and you get very like, oh no, is that how people really think? And then it's hard to exist in that space. I was very proud of them for the work that they did to try to educate people about why mascots are racist and why they are not beneficial for anyone. I was very disheartened by the response of people to what they were doing. I couldn't believe that there were students who felt like they could say things like, we are the ones that are upholding Aztec culture in people's imagination. We are the ones that are like supporting them. We are honoring them. I couldn't believe that those things could be stated out loud and that nobody would be like, actually, that's not a thing. That's not like a real thing. So it was very hard to watch that from far away because I just wanted to like run out and tell the students, like, I promise you what you're doing really matters and is important. I will say this, it's hard for me to talk about mascots now. And after that, watching that go down and watching the associate students decide to vote against what they were asking them to do, I did not teach about mascots for a year in my own classes. And the reason why is because I was pissed. I was really pissed off that we had done so much work as Native people, as activists, to find all the ways that we were supposed to prove to everyone that this was a thing that we needed to change. We had done scientific studies. We had done outreach to communities. We had shown where there were actual impacts on Native youth and the way that that is tied to like their self-esteem and ability to perform in schools. We had done everything we were supposed to do so that when it came time for people to understand why mascots are not beneficial for everyone, it should be a very easy answer. No thanks, we don't want to do that. We want to support people. It's very simple and straightforward, and yet there was still all of this pushback. And I was like, what else are we supposed to do? Like, where else can we go? We've done everything we're supposed to do to prove to you guys that this is a problem, and you're still not willing to just say, oh, okay, never mind, it's just a mascot. And if I have to hear all the time, because every time I do these talks, people come up to me like, it's just a mascot. I'm like, ditto, man, get rid of it. It's just a mascot. So I couldn't teach about it for like a whole friggin' year. My students would come up to me and they would be like, how come you're not talking about the mascot this semester? And I'd say, because I'm pissed, and my teaching you about mascots is gonna be like, they're gonna want me to have a conversation about like both sides of this issue, and I'm gonna be like, there is no other side. If you still think there should be mascots, I can't help you. I don't know what else to do. So I couldn't teach it. That's how much I thought, wow, we have like to push that hard. The students who stood up and shared their stories about what happened to them when they started to talk about changing this mascot at San Diego State, the way that they got attacked on social media, the horrific things that were said to them about their lives and who they are and whether or not they belong in this space. I can't believe that they had to take that on. I super wish that they wouldn't have had to. I still, to this day, I hate that that was said to them and that nobody stood up and said, you don't get to say that kind of things to students in this space. That is unacceptable behavior, and that's why mascots are not welcome here. So, I now have started teaching about mascots again, but I always start my talks with like, by the way, I'm totally not unbiased in this situation, and if after this talk you still think you should have a mascot, I can't help you. I don't know what else to do. I do think that when we start pushing it back against this like sort of rhetoric that this is normalized in our society, what you start to see is that the way that we normalize mascots is the way that we normalize how we treat all peoples, is the way that we normalize like the incarceration of peoples all throughout our like state and local governments, is the way that we normalize the taking of land. It all feeds into each other. I wish it was just a mascot issue. It's never just a mascot issue. And we as like people who exist in these spaces should be the first to say, like, fuck that mascot. Let's just get a new one. It's not that hard. And as an alumni, I get to say that. And you all have to listen to me. I always laugh when they're like, what will the alumni think? But my plan for today is what the alumni think. I also filled out all the surveys They kept sending me alumni surveys. I was like, yeah, I got a survey for you, right? Like, I tried, you guys. But all I can say now is, like, it's up to you all to start to say this is unacceptable. Like, we're just not going to accept it any longer. There's no, I wish people are gonna say, is there a way we could make the mascot better? No, racism is racism. Like, why are you trying to make racism less racist? Like, I don't know, like, just get rid of it. What's it gonna do? You all are gonna stop going to San Diego State.
Let's get up.
Right? Like, you're just all gonna stop coming here and be like, I can't go there, I went there for the mascot. No. Okay, but the plan for today actually is to talk a little bit about decolonization, because I actually think that plays into what I talk about the mascot. I promise it comes back again. And like radical imagination, these terms that people sort of call like relatively new, but for me, Native people have been theorizing through radical imagination since the beginning of time. If you look at our stories are like moments of radical imagination of how things could work, right? Coyote, he sees the stars, he wants to dance with them, he goes up to the stars. They're dancing all night long. He's like, I'm getting tired. They said, keep up, Coyote, or we're gonna drop you down to the earth. And then they did, and he broke into a million pieces. Like, that's some radical imagination about how things work and who, like, what we should think about the world. Our radical indigenous imaginations were based on like super radical ideas like we should take care of our more than human relatives, that we should actually think about how they're also here. It's not just us that we need to consider when we're making decisions, that you have a responsibility to this place and a responsibility that in that you live here to take care of it, that it has a responsibility for you, so we are intertwined to this place, that there is enough for everyone. That is a basis of indigenous ideas about life and how it works. There is enough for everyone, and we've been taught to think that there isn't enough, but there is. We also, women are just as important as men. Gender balance is very important to our cultures and societies. I also say, you know, one of our like big philosophies of life is like there's always a joke in there somewhere. You just have to find the funny, and like everything you do, we're very hilarious people. We love to tell jokes about really inappropriate things. Old Indian women are some of the most inappropriate people you're ever gonna meet. They will tell some of like the dirtiest jokes. Joking is very clear, like you can always find funny in just about anything. It's not your job to accumulate wealth. That's something that's like the basis of how we do things in our cultures and societies. It is your job, if you have wealth, to then use that wealth to take care of your people. Like that's what it's for. And then finally, we all go a little coyote sometimes, right? Like he's a little in there for all of us. Like we're all a little bit kind of playing tricks on people. I think we've been given the tools to radically imagine a different future since the very beginning. We've been given the ability to be able to see what that future could look like. We've learned that from dreaming. We dream this into being. We sing it into being. We story this into being. We have been telling stories since the beginning of time. We have always done this. This is who we are. We tell these stories so we can imagine a different future. Because of the work I do, I go around to do these talks about like what decolonization is. And when I try to explain decolonization to people, I usually go with like this explanation. Let's say you have a computer, right? And your friends, like your roommate's friend shows up and like steals your computer from you, and then periodically comes back to your house to use it in front of you. Like how long until you're all, okay, cool, it's yours now, because you took it and you're using it? And students are always like, well, never, like I should just give it back. And I was like, I know, like when they come to your house, what do you say? And you're like, give it back. Now, so what will happen is you will tell them like, okay, so you stole my computer and you're using it in front of me. Could you maybe give it back? And they'll be like, you know, look, I kind of found this computer. I mostly like discovered it because nobody was using it at the time. So I don't think I should have to give it back because I like discovered this computer. And so you're like, cool, that's a legit way in which to get a computer and no problem. Thanks, I'm sorry I brought it up. And students are like, no, give it back. And I was like, all right, so now your friend comes to you and they're like, listen, I get that this was your computer, but like I've been using it for a while and I put like a lot of files on it and stuff, and I put stickers all over the back of it. So I feel like I'm also attached to this computer, and now you want it back? That doesn't seem fair. And you'll go, oh, sorry, like you're using it? No, give it back, right? Like you have to give it back. Now what they'll say, so now they're gonna get mad at you because you keep bringing it up. Like every time they come over to your house, you're like, that's my computer. And then they're like, listen, man, what if every time before I use this computer, I acknowledge that it used to be your computer? And that you were like the original caretaker of this computer. But now it's mine, but I am in acknowledgement of that you at one time owned it. You're welcome. And you're gonna be all, cool, that's good enough for me. No, give it back. So then they'll be like, listen, okay, like obviously you're just kind of selfish because you keep bringing this up. Why can't we like co-manage this computer? So instead of me giving it back, we'll write a policy where sometimes I manage it and sometimes you manage it, and we'll consult with each other about how best to use this computer, and that will be the co-management of our computer. And you're like, except you stole it, and now you want me to co-manage it with you? Yeah, that seems like the best idea for the two of us. No, give it back. So it will keep like going on. I mean, this is sort of what happens when it comes to decolonization. They just keep adding in like over and over again. And the point of decolonization is that it's not real until you give it back. All it is acknowledgement stickers on a computer until you just give back what you stole. Now, in my presentations, when I talk about this, I start talking to people and I'm like, actually, you gotta give the land back. People get really like, wait, what does that mean, right? And I'll start going on about like revitalization and resurgence and what decolonization looks like and how decolonization could be. And I will always be like, but in the end, we can do all of these things, but until you give the land back, it doesn't actually mean anything. And I will always get someone who's like, raising their hand, right? And they'll go, decolonization sounds really interesting. That's their favorite word. But I have one question. What are you gonna do with all the white people? And I'll be like, ooh. And then I'll say, you know, I can't really imagine. Like imagine like we get the land back and like the salmon are running and like bear is like going and taking a nap in the field and there's like a friggin' river in Los Angeles again, right? And then our main question is like, well, what are we gonna do with all the white people? And so sometimes I don't know how to answer that question because first of all, they haven't put me in charge of decolonization yet. So I don't quite know how we're gonna make that plan, but I will say to people like, I don't know. Like, I don't know the answer to that question. The second question is always, like, I always go, you know, like, we didn't really kick you out the first time you got here. So if we're looking at history, I don't know if that's gonna be such a problem. The third one is, I always say to them, this actually isn't really about you, but way to make it about you, right? Like, good for you. Lately, though, I've done this thing where people come up to me and they'll be like, well, what are you gonna do with all the white people? And I'll stop and I'll be like, do you, like, own a lot of land somewhere? And they'll be like, what? And I'll go like, you personally own like a whole bunch of land? And they always are like, no. And then I said, if tomorrow, like all the state parks got given back to Indian people, would you notice? And they were like, not really. And I said, because you know, most land isn't owned by individuals, it's really owned by like governments. And so transferring land from government to government into possession of the peoples that you like actually stole it from, you probably wouldn't even notice. And so why are you so concerned? Unless you have like a large piece of land that you're worried that they'll take back. And they were like, no, I don't actually own anything. The house, a condo, like anything. And then I'll be like, then this is not really your problem. Like, why are we so worried, right? And eventually they'll go, well, that's because like if we give it to you guys, maybe you'll keep it so like we can't use it. Like, what if you keep us out? And I'm like, you think that the government couldn't just now like keep you from using land? They do that all the time. Like they all the time tell you, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't build this, you can't take this here, and let you take that at face value, but suddenly Indian people have it and it's gonna be so much worse than the rules that the government has already put on you in terms of what you can do with land. And I was like, do you think we're gonna get the national parks and we're gonna build like a big wall around it? We're gonna be like, nobody can come in. And then we're just gonna like take selfies and post them on Instagram of all the fun Indian people are having in national parks without you? Like really, all it really means is that smaller governments are going to be in charge of larger land spaces, where we could actually pass laws that actually protect these spaces from things like fracking and mining and over-harvesting, where it takes forever to pass those kinds of laws now, where our actual public lands right now are being threatened with fracking and mining and over-harvesting, and tribes could pass things that said, you're not allowed to do that on our lands. It actually makes it easier to protect the lands that we care so much about. But whenever I bring it up, people's immediate response is like, oh, what about, how are you gonna, like, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna treat us? And this becomes important, like I totally get it, because I went to this great lecture by this woman one time and she was saying, we have an easier time imagining what we would do in a zombie apocalypse than we do imagining the end of capitalism. And part of that is because we've never been taught how to imagine the end of capitalism, but we all know whose house we're going to once like the zombie apocalypse starts, where we're gonna go first, how we're gonna survive, because we have been taught to imagine that. So we have to open up our imaginations of what this looks like. Right now, when we hear it, we get really like, ooh, I don't know what that means, but we can imagine a space beyond settler colonialism that exists in a very different way than just, you've taken my land now and you're gonna do the exact same thing to me that we did to you guys. This becomes kind of the everyday logics of settler colonialism that we live with. We've been taught as if this thing, this settler colonial culture, has always existed and will always exist, that there is never any way we could get beyond the society that we have right now, that we can't make big changes because this is how it will always be. We live with those logics every day. We get taught that like there's no way to move beyond it. Really, I think it's because we need to be able to justify and accept them throughout our life. So we start learning about them very young, these logics of how this society is supposed to be. One of my favorite ones is the logic of manifest destiny. We kind of start learning about that in 3rd or 4th grade. How many people had to learn about manifest destiny at some point in their lives? Okay, if you ever like think about what manifest destiny actually is, it says that it's God-given right to land, where if you take that apart, that's not actually a thing. It's not a real thing. If an alien came down right now and they were like, what's happening? And I was like, manifest destiny, God-given right to land, the alien would be like, that's not a thing. We kind of just made that up one day and now we just live like it's a thing. And then we start teaching kids about it when they're little, and you're probably in the 3rd grade going like, I don't know if that's a thing. But you're not taught how to question or be critical of that. Unless you're me, because my mom, right? And so they would be like, manifest destiny, God-given right to land. And then I would like raise my little 3rd grade hand and I would be like, actually, this land is not your land, and your God didn't really get to decide like if we owned it or you owned it. And also like, even though we think that it's a thing, it's not like a real thing, it's sort of just a made up thing that somebody did one day. And we never talk about the amount of like genocide and violence it took to make that thing a thing. And then my 3rd grade teacher was like, Cutcha, I do not get paid enough for this shit. And I was like, I'm sorry, I just have some questions. And then she would be like, listen, this textbook says that manifest destiny is a thing. And these old ass documents that we can get from the library say that manifest destiny is a thing. And this curriculum says that manifest destiny is a thing. And I just truly need you to write on the test that manifest destiny is a thing, because I do not get paid enough for this shit. And I was like, okay. So we don't learn how to imagine our decolonized futures. We learn manifest destiny from the time that we are like in the 3rd grade. And that tells us that that's the only way that we can see the world. And what we need to start doing is thinking beyond that and questioning it. We learn these stories. Every story you read in like the 11th and 12th grade by like the canonical writers of literature, who all just happen to be white males, right? Are all about like money, 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 and land. And this idea of like how you own land, how you understand land, this idea that this land is your land and this land is my land. Yeah, from California to New York Island. But actually, if you think about it, like, it's just my land, and you took my land, and it's not your land, from California to the New York Islands, and the Redwood Forest and the Gulf Stream waters. So the land was actually made not for you and me, but for us to take care of in a way that acknowledges the deep interrelationship we share with the flora and fauna and accepts responsibility we have to respect the rights and wisdom of the land that we inhabit and live with. That's the actual message of what land is. But we learn about land as property, not about our relationship to it. Which brings me back to the original question, what are you gonna do with all the white people? Which I've been trying to solve this problem now for like years. And I say that's like some real settler colonial anxiety, because we've only been taught to imagine decolonization as like colonization, the remix. Like we're somehow gonna turn around and recolonize everybody else, like haha, our turn, right? This is why alien movies are always like, we're here to colonize you. We've come to this planet to like take all your resources, because the idea is we have internalized this settler colonial anxiety that everybody colonizes, even aliens, and that when aliens come, they will colonize us. And so we work out these settler colonial anxieties through alien stories. In my mind, I actually am convinced that aliens will come here and they will land, and we will like show up with nuclear weapons to fight them, and they'll be like, what are you doing? And then we'll go, well, you're here to colonize us. And they'll go, colonization, that's so primitive. We assume these things because of the kinds of ways that we've been taught to imagine the world. It's because settler colonialism is very tenuous. It's like this, it's the most tenuous system a group of people can live under. The whole thing is based on like discovery. The idea that you can discover a place where millions of people live. It's a friggin' house of cards. Like if you think about it, we base our entire legal system on the fact that we discovered America, and you're kind of like, that's not a thing. And they're like, yeah, but that's how we put our entire legal system together, is that you can discover this place. So it becomes this very big house of cards if you start to take apart this rhetoric. People get very scared because they're like, it's gonna fall apart, the whole thing that we built. Now, if you think about it, this idea of like Columbus discovering America, it's like he landed and he was all, surprise, God has sent me. And the Indians were probably like, the fuck is this guy's problem, right? Like, they knew from the beginning, you can't discover a place that we live, but what happens is the United States turns around and is like, seems legit. We should use that to build our entire legal system. So that is the foundation of our entire country, that you can discover this land. But then, if you think about it, like Benjamin Franklin, I like to imagine Benjamin Franklin being back there being like, manifest destiny, that's a thing. Also, we discovered this place because it was our God-given right to land. And then I'll bet you like John Adams was like, I don't know if that's a thing, because we didn't really discover it. Like Spain discovered it and England discovered it, and then we came after that, so we don't really have a discovery right. And then Benjamin Franklin was probably like, shut up, John Adams. Which in my mind, he says that to John Adams a lot, because John Adams was always writing these letters like, I have a wife I really like, I think she should be able to vote. And I'll bet you he was like, shut up, John Adams! Likely Manifest Destiny was like, they were all in agreement. They liked Manifest Destiny. It's sort of, it made sense to them. It was an easy way of sort of saying like, no, we just have rights to this land. So I'm not trying to say that John Adams is better than Benjamin Franklin, right? But what they had to do was write it down to make it real. In their mind, once they wrote it down, Manifest Destiny became real. Then they put it in an archive so that Manifest Destiny would become important. And suddenly we are basing all of our decisions off of this, like, well, it's in an archive. They wrote it with like a really old pen on a really old piece of paper. It must be a thing. It's actually not real, and that's what we have to understand. It's imagined. And much like what we're trying to do, imagine a world into being, that's what they did. They imagined what they thought the world to be, and then it became. so we can use our radical imaginations to do the exact same thing. It's hard to hear for people because, you know, our education system is always all discovery, manifest destiny. And so I present at a lot of conferences now, and I'm like a keynote speaker. And what I love is I have to go and do all these talks, right, where I'm trying to tell people, like, this is what happened, this is what's going on. And I have to watch, settlers or people who live in a settler colonial society go through, like, grief, like settler colonial grief, because they've never learned this before. And so I have, like, been watching them go through, like, there's actually 7 stages of settler colonial grief. And me as, like, a keynote speaker, I will, like, do this whole talk, and then people will, like, just play out this grief, like, right in front of me all the time, just by asking questions or, like, coming up to me afterwards. And so they usually start off in denial, right? Because that's the first stage. Then they kind of go quickly into, like, bargaining. They'll move into anger. Sometimes many of them try to skip anger because they feel really bad if they get angry at me. So then they try to go straight into sadness. And most people hang out in sadness. And they don't move to the next phase, which for me is like action. They just hang out in sadness. And then they come to me and they're like, now I'm so sad. And I'm always like, I gotta, like, drag you up into action. Like, come on, we gotta go together. So it's their 5 stages of grief. Denial. This can't be true. That's what they say. This can't be true. Are you sure? There's no way that you just lied about this? There's got to be some nuance you're not telling me. I'm going to have to Google that for myself. I hear that a lot from people. They're in denial. They're like, you came here and lied to me. Okay. Sometimes they're in bargaining. They'll come up and be like, there has to be something good that settler colonialism did, right? What about the good things that settlers did, right? And they want me to, like, they're like, what about pants? What about computers? What about cars? The ones who get into anger, they'll always be like, you just hate white people and you think Indians are better than everyone. True, I might think Indians are better than everyone. You might, and they're always like, you actually just want it to be someone else's fault. Why can't you just get over it? And then they'll come up and be like, you're welcome for pants. Also computers and cars. It's action that I'm trying to get people to. I understand going through the settler colonial grief stages because action's the hard part. That's the time to give the land back, right? That's the part where you're like, what am I gonna do? So I become obsessed with this idea of finding out what would happen if I started mourning the loss of, like, land and lives and fish, if my grief that I carry because of this was on display for everybody. The way that people are allowed to display their grief to me. If I could display my grief to everyone, what would happen? And I find that I actually spend most of my time in denial because I have to sort of stand in spaces and kind of act like I don't carry the blood of my ancestors in my veins every single day. Like this was the blood that actually ran rivers red when they killed all of us. That I don't actually think about what happened with, like, slaughtered children and the way that we had to hold them while they were dying and ask why. Like, I don't try to wear that on my sleeve, and I wonder what people would do if I mourned in front of them. Because we sang and danced for all the people that we lost, and that song comes from me now when I sing. And I close my eyes and hug my daughter tighter at night because there was a time when they would have ripped her from my arms and sold her. And the thing I know is that I would have never stopped looking for her. I would have spent the rest of my life finding her. And that to me is what I carry with me. Like, they don't continue to search and grieve. Like, we don't continue to search and grieve. And we live here in this space that was stolen from us. This place where we buried our beloved and where we sing and dance and laugh and love. And this is the place where we cry tears of joy and sadness from laughing so hard that our stomachs hurt and from hurting so hard that we were convinced we would never laugh again. And I am not allowed to do that. I can't wear my grief because it scares people. And they just go, well, she's very emotional. Or, well, she's very biased. Or, well, she just wants to make me feel bad. I don't need them to dismiss my grief. And the strength that it takes to allow that hurt to be made public is a way that says, like, I am here and I'm a person. And to only have them then turn around and be like, thanks for that, but I'm still not getting rid of your mascot. Fuck you. Like, that took so much from us. I also think that people would likely try to like wear my grief too. Like they grab onto me and be like, I also mourn, I mourn with you, which has actually happened to me. I've had people who come up to me after lectures and they're like, I still mourn the loss of the great red man. I cry every day about what we did to California Indians. And I know that it's important to be sad because we as human beings need to be given space to be sad, but I don't really just need sadness. Like I need action. And so I always am like, lately, I'll like stop and be like, I get it, you're sad. And I'll like kind of give them a hug, which is big for me, I don't really hug people. And I'll be like, you know, I really understand your sadness. So I know a lot of California Indian organizations that you can give money to, if you want to. And then I'll start to be like, oh, and also, how much land do you own? Because to me, we have to push them into action. It's the part where we move on to the next thing. Now, I would say like, this settler colonial grief, I went through 5 stages. Everybody's like, you said 7. I do think there are 7 stages. If you can't get to action, which they rarely do, then they decide they're done with sadness. They kind of have this like middle part that they go into, which is called appropriation or claiming, or what I like to call my Cherokee princess great-great-grandma, or what I now like to call, but my DNA test, And so they like hit over there, because they're like, I'm not gonna go to action, I'm gonna go to like my DNA test. And so I'm like, okay, my job is to sort of be like, I get it, let's like pull you out of there and into like action. And that is what radical imagination asks them to do, is like, how do we imagine beyond, it's not my fault or I don't want to feel bad, to like, what can we do with our collective energy and in our collective space? So people always ask me, what do we do? And I say, here's my advice, put your money where your mouth is, donate to Native organizations who are already doing this work. Right now, even $5 is something. If you can give $5 to a Native organization doing this work, why not? Because it says I actually care about this work that you're doing to decolonize this space. I tell them, start telling everybody you know to give land back. All the land, like all of it. Like even the in and outs. I call that inception. So what I say is like, I have started to say things out loud even though they might seem crazy, because I feel like I'm just incepting people's brains. I'm like putting these little things out there that I'm like, you should just give the land back. And then they kind of like take that in, and like 2 years later, they'll be like, maybe I should just give the land back. I don't know why I'm thinking that. But like, it seems like a good idea. I just say things now. Like people will come to me and they'll be like, hey, I do all this work with basket collections. What should we do? What are your recommendations? I'll be like, you should give it back. And they'll be like, Cutcha, I mean like give it all back? And I was like, anybody that's also inherited collections should also give those back. And they're like, wait, give those back? And I'm like, also you should give back all the stuff in the museums. And they're like, what? Like all of it? And I was like, also no university should be in possession of indigenous remains. You should give all those back too. And then they're like, what? And then I keep going. I was like, also, Native students should not have to pay tuition at universities, especially land-grant institutions, because this is land that was supposed to be there anyway, so let's just have free tuition for Native students. And they're like, wait, what? And then I'm all, anybody that works for the state or federal or local government should have to major or minor in American Indian Studies or Native American Studies to work there. And they're like, oh my gosh, you are talking crazy. And I'll be like, also give the land back. And then they'll be like, I don't know if that's a thing. And then I just wait for 2 years. And then they're like, you know what sounds like a good idea? And I know it works because my friend went and did a presentation about basketry, and she said, my friend told me I should just start saying things out loud. So I'm gonna say, you should give all the baskets back. And afterwards, this guy walked up to her and he was like, you know, I really thought about what you said, and I have a bunch of baskets. I think I should give them back. Nobody had just ever said it out loud before. So, we all have to start participating in that, saying those things out loud that might seem crazy. My Inception is Decolonial because the rest of Inception that's going on out there with like, because they're incepting you all the time, right? That's colonizing like BS. The other day I read this article about this like guy who was deciding, he works for a government agency, and he was like, I'm gonna make this speech, and what I'm gonna say is, we should let Indians embrace capitalism and become corporations. He's like, capitalism for everybody. They should no longer be tribes, they should be corporations. And I was just like, oh my God. I was all, sit down, nobody wants like your piece of shit capitalism, right? Like, this is termination 3.0, like we know it. And so I wake up most days really at that level of fed up, because that's kind of what I'm always at. I get fed up with like these ideas, we're gonna bring capitalism to you, we're gonna help you, we're gonna like make sure that you're using the land in the right way. I hate that Congress gets to make decisions about Indian people and what's going on with them when I could probably like poll most of Congress and just ask them how many federally recognized tribes are there in the United States of America, and they wouldn't even know. It's 573, by the way. There's 573 Native nations, recognized Native nations in the United States of America. So I could see Congress and you're like going in them, how many federally recognized tribes are there in the United States? And they would be like, tribes? They don't look Indian to me, right? And then they'd be like, where's Tonto? And then a bunch of media people would be like, this is Congress's new way of thinking. You gotta produce Tonto, or like, how are you gonna prove you're an Indian? And I would legit go and get Johnny Depp, and I would be like, put that bird on your head, and come to Congress and tell them that we are real Indians, and use your like adopted Comanche cred, right, that he gets, because somebody's gotta help us to be able to speak to Congress in a way that they recognize us as Indians. I call them like our congressional overlords. This is because of plenary power. If you don't know about plenary power, you should like look it up. Plenary power says that Congress has the ability to be able to make these decisions about Indian people and Indian lands when they might have absolutely no information about Indian people or Indian lands. And plenary power was just made up one day. Again, another imagined thing that just came into being. And then suddenly it became how we understood the way that the world was supposed to work. So I hate that I still have to wake up now and worry that we're gonna start terminating tribal nations and make them into corporations. Like, I shouldn't have to do that. Like, that should not even be an issue, but it still is. Do I think some tribes might say that they would like more control over their lands and that they would not have to worry about like the friggin' federal government and its stupid like tendency to sort of lord over Native people? Like, actually, we're the ones in charge of your lands. Yeah, but I also think nobody wins at capitalism. I mean, like, literally nobody. Somebody's gonna be like, Jeff Bezos wins at capitalism, right? Or Rockefeller wins at capitalism. Or Exxon wins at capitalism, which, by the way, Exxon isn't a person, like, no matter what the Supreme Court says. I always say to people, like, Exxon doesn't have to stand in line at Starbucks waiting to figure out how they're gonna get like the newest and latest Frappuccino for their 3 kids who are like, I have to have the newest Frappuccino, I'm gonna freak out on you. Like, Exxon doesn't have to worry about whether or not those children are gonna be happy with their Frappuccinos. Exxon doesn't have to fill out mounds of paperwork to pay $100 less on their friggin' student loans. Like, Exxon doesn't have to worry that they're not gonna be able to pay their car payment and their house payment because they also have to pay off medical bills. Exxon isn't screening calls like only collectors call during dinner time. Exxon's not a person. No person wins at capitalism. So you may acquire all the money, but at the expense of what? Air, water, the air we breathe. They wouldn't allow us to play the game unless they knew we would lose. We don't get to play games that they think that we can win. And I don't want us to become like corporations, because we are nations of people, and we aren't fighting for futures because we hope that it includes like low interest rates. We're fighting for our continued existence. We didn't make treaties because they were like, allow us to recognize you as corporations. We made them because they owed us, like friggin' big, for what they were about to do for the land that they wanted control over. I think we forget that the treaties were our negotiations with them to say, you are about to get something that you could never pay for. You are about to get something that you could never pay for. And if you want it, it's gonna cost you like $1 billion, cotillion, quadrillion dollars. And we take Square now, so, you know, like, run it through. And they were like, oh, we don't actually have that much money. And we're like, okay, cool. So we're gonna make an agreement that for all time, you are going to respect this relationship and provide for us these things, because otherwise your lease is up. This is an agreement that they made. The founding fathers made this agreement with Indian people. It was not a trick. It was not something that anybody got one over on anybody. This was an agreement that was made between two nations. And now we have to go to court all the time. And we as Indian people are asking one thing: will you please just abide by your laws? I mean, we're paying all this money to ask the federal government to abide by its own laws. That's what Indian people are fighting for. They're saying, abide by the treaties that you made. Abide by the agreements that you made. In the case of the treaties, they're on the same level as the Constitution, by the way. And we always think of the Constitution as like a big friggin' deal. The Constitution matters. Treaties are on the exact same level as that. We need to be abiding by the treaties. We need to understand that those treaties were forever and all time. And that's actually why I wake up on a Wednesday like really pissed off. Stuff like that, right? Like I always am constantly having to explain to people. Because one of these days someone's gonna walk up to me at Starbucks. Or while I've got my legs spread open like getting a pap smear, which true story, this did happen. Or while I'm going like live on air for like an interview, and they're gonna be like, hey, you're an Indian. How come Indians? What about Indians? Can you explain to me about this about Indians? I literally was like getting a pap smear. My doctor was like, you're Indians? You're an Indian, how do you feel about casinos? And I was like, I don't know. You're like open my junk. Like, can I just have a space, right? But one of these days, someone's gonna walk up to me, true story, while I'm like just trying to change out of my swimsuit in the community pool and get dressed, and they're gonna be like, hey, you're an Indian, how do you, and I'm just gonna grab whatever's in their hand and like walk away, and they're gonna be like, what are you doing? And I'll be like, wait man, like, I just discovered this. I'm gonna take it now. Don't cry or get angry. It's unbecoming. But if you like, in 150 years, my great-great-grandchildren can write your great-great-grandchildren a letter, and they'll say that they're sorry, but I'm not sorry. And that's how Indians feel about it. Next question. I also have been writing a lot lately about conversations that I've had with people because I put these ideas out there and then they always write to me, like messages. Actually, it's on Twitter. This mainly happens on Twitter because I'm actually too busy to conversate with people in real life. And if you ever meet me in real life, everybody's always like, you're very funny on your blog or like when you talk. And then I'll go, thanks. And then they'll look at me and they'll be like, be funny. And I'm like, so I always feel like I need to have like a joke on, like, I gotta have a joke. I don't have one yet, but eventually I'm gonna be like. So I put the whole like, hey, you stole my computer thing on Twitter a few months ago, and then I start getting these like real witty retorts from people. And one of them was like, well, actually, this is more like someone stole your computer, and then every generation helped to improve that computer so that it has the best processor and it's upgraded, and now you want your upgraded computer back. And I usually don't like write back to people on Twitter because that gets you nowhere. But maybe because I'm getting older now, and like old people are always writing back to people on Twitter. That now I'm starting to reply because I get all these freaking replies on Twitter, like all the time. People will send me things when I'm talking about cultural appropriation, and they'll be like, you're welcome for pants. Like you have to give pants back, like if you're talking about cultural appropriation. And I always think like if this is where we're at in the conversation, like I don't even know where to begin. But now lately, I just write back like, we had pants. And then I see things like, also you're welcome for like bathing and basic everyday hygiene and corn and potatoes and chocolate and roads and all the ways that you've laid out like every city in the United States. Period. So then this Twitter person wrote me back, right, and they were like, actually we upgraded your computer for you and now you want it back. And I just tweeted back, the computer is literally on fire and you spilled oil all over it. So here's an actual conversation, I wrote it down, that I had with a guy after I gave a lecture on missing and murdered Indigenous women. Which I explained in the lecture is We are less than 2% of the population in the US, but Native women are the most likely to be raped. They're the most likely to be victim of violent crimes. They're the most likely to be murdered. They're the most likely to have cases go unprosecuted because of loopholes in current laws, which means you can actually rape a Native woman in the US and maybe not be charged for it. And this guy walks up to me afterwards. Now listen, I worked really hard to become a doctor. Not a kind of doctor that can help you if you're like choking to death and or need like some kind of, although I could try to do something, right? But like the kind of doctor that can tell you like why settler colonialism is causing your anxiety. So he walks up to me and he's like, is that true? What you just said, is that true? And I was like, yeah, it's true. I got my fucking Ph.D. in Native American Studies, man. Also, I focused on feminist theory, and I backed up every single slide with like statistics and government reports, and I've been involved in like all kinds of research projects, and I continue to find additional sources of all the support that I just said, so it's really fucking true. Except that's not what I said at all, because I would never say that to somebody, right? Instead, he was like, is that true? Is what you said true? And I was like, yep, it's true. And he goes, if this is such a big problem, like violence and rape of Native women, and it's because laws are written in a way that allows people to get away with this, why don't Native Americans just hire better lawyers so that they can sue everyone and take care of this problem? And I was like, why don't we hire better lawyers? And he was like, yeah, because that way you can fix this. If you had better lawyers, they could fight with everyone and get it fixed. So hire those lawyers and get the laws changed. And I was like, many of your tribes have like a lot of Native lawyers, and these lawyers are like constantly fighting for these legal protections, but unfortunately it takes time and is wrapped up in a lot of stereotypical beliefs about Indian people. And he's like, but, and I was like, let me give you an example. 2 years ago, there was a boy who was sexually assaulted multiple times by an employee of Dollar General. They declined to prosecute this man because of all of the laws. And Dollar General had already agreed in previous statements that if there were any civil claims that they would go to tribal court, abide by tribal law. But rather than doing that, Dollar General sued and forced the tribe to go all the way to the Supreme Court. This ended up costing much more time and money than on the part of the tribe and Dollar General. And in the end, the court said you have to go to tribal court. So guess what? That was however many hundreds of thousands to $1 million. And years later, it took all of that just to get the Supreme Court to say, yes, you have to abide by the agreements that you signed to go to tribal court to give this kid some justice. How much time and money does it take for Congress to pass a healthcare law? We're still fighting about that. It's not that simple. And he was like, but, and I was like, I'm not finished. I wish I had all of the money to throw at this problem. I wish we could throw $1 billion at trying to fix settler colonialism, which is designed to eliminate sovereignty and rights to land and peoples, but I don't have $1 billion. You know who does? Jeff Bezos. Why are you asking Jeff Bezos to solve this problem? I was like, Indian people didn't actually create this problem. So settler colonialism created this problem, yet you think that we should be responsible for fixing this problem? And he was like, no, I mean, I would just wish there was something I could do. So I said, if it makes you feel any better, you can give me your money, and I will happily turn around and donate it to places that are trying to fight this problem. And then I was like, also, how much land do you own? Which is how we end, or we begin. Here's the things we've learned today. Mascots are racist. I don't know how many more ways to prove it to you. If you continue to support Native mascots, you are supporting racist depictions of Native people, so don't do that. You should just change it. You'll be okay. San Diego State will be okay, I promise. Radical imagination begins with saying things out loud, allowing ourselves to believe in these futures and centering voices of those that would normally be silenced, to remind us that many of our best things begin as dreams and poems and stories, and we tell them into being. And third, it ain't a thing until you give the land back. And land is being given back all the time. Where I'm from, the city of Eureka actually just gave back a portion of Tuluwat Island to the Leac peoples. In other parts of California, like the Central Coast, land is being given back to tribes in Pomo country. Sometimes when I'm thinking about decolonization, I start thinking about like, what does this mean and how is this gonna work? And I actually get to dams. I think about dams. In 2011, the largest dam removal in US history actually began in Washington State. There were 2 dams that were taken down to restore spawning areas for critically endangered salmon. And there was a lot of concern on the part of scientists because When you're talking about taking down the dams, you're talking about like 100 years of sediment that's trapped behind the dam, that when you take it down, it's gonna flow through the ecosystem. And everybody was wondering, what's this going to mean? How much damage is that actually going to do? How long are we gonna have to live with the damage that comes from taking the dams down? In many cases, scientists anticipated many, many years of living with damage from taking the dams down. And the thing is that when you're talking about it, you're saying, well, look, it took a lot of years of destruction to make this problem. Of course, it's gonna take a lot of years of work to fix this problem, but we're signing up for that because we think about 7 generations forward. It's not just for us, it's for them. So we have to do it. And everybody was sort of prepared for like this long haul of recovery, and the fact that this restored ecosystem was going to take a long time. But what happened after they took the dams down is they said that the recovery was basically immediate. That they did a US geological survey of more than 200 dam removals. They found that fish species and habitat changed rapidly, that even when digesting a fairly large sediment pulse, the system settled down substantially after only 3 to 5 years. Because that's it. The dam doesn't make any sense. It didn't make sense for the ecosystem. It was illogical. It was forcing the ecosystem into something that was not sustainable. But the ecosystem bounces back because when everything is working together, it can heal very quickly. And that's how I imagine decolonization. The logics of settler colonialism are illogical. We live in this space that is hard to live in every single day for everybody. And once we start, and we wonder about like our anxiety and why we're like running out of water and why there are people without food and housing, and like really none of it makes any sense. But decolonization is a future without dams. It's a future that happens very quickly. And all I'm asking you to do today is imagine it.